I want to talk about politics for a second. The Democratic primary in particular. The frontrunner of the Democratic race is someone who's simply trying to defend the status quo. Someone who says that we don't need a political revolution or radical change. We just need to keep on doing what we've been doing and protect the progress we've already made. And I don't get it. I don't understand why Democrats want that. I don't understand why moving slow and steady, like we've done in the last 6 years or so, sounds so appealing to Democratic voters. I understand that people have busy lives and don't have much time to pay attention to politics, and that the media hasn't talked much about the state of the Democratic Party. But this is something all Democrats need to hear. The Democratic Party is on its deathbed. The warning shot should have been the Flint, Michigan water crisis. A Republican governor poisoned an entire city and got away with it. This should have been a warning shot to Democrats because this didn't happen in Alabama. This didn't happen in deep red Texas. This happened in the deep blue Democratic stronghold of Michigan, which has a Republican governor, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House of Representatives. Republicans have enough control that they can poison children and face no political or legal consequences. In a blue state. And that's not limited to Michigan state lines. Under President Obama, Democrats have lost 11 governorships and 913 state legislative seats. Out of the 50 states, only 2 have seen an increase in the number of Democrats in their state legislature. 3 seats in Illinois and 1 seat in New Jersey. 2 out of 50. In 35 states, Democrats saw double-digit losses in state legislatures, single-digit losses in another 11 states, and broke even in California. The 50th state, for those of you checking my math, is Nebraska, which has an independent unicameral legislature, so technically Democrats broke even, moving from 0 to 0 there. In reality, though, Nebraska is run by Republicans. That's the status quo Hillary Clinton and her supporters are fighting for. Losses in 46 of the 50 states. Republicans have 68 of the 98 partisan state legislatures, 31 governors, and the House, Senate, and governorship of 23 states. For comparison, Democrats only have full control of 7 state governments. On the national level, Republicans have the most representatives they've had in the U.S. Congress since the Hoover administration, which precipitated the massive economic downturn known as the Great Depression, after levels of inequality only rivaled by what we have today. The effect of the Republican electoral success can be felt across the country in state-level fights over voting rights, abortion, gay rights, organized labor, drug policy, education spending, infrastructure, hell, even bathrooms. We find ourselves on a sinking ship, and the Democratic Party will drown if we don't dramatically change course. Hillary Clinton's entire campaign is about repeating the last 8 years, where the Republicans swept through the states. At best, we should expect midterm elections much worse for Democrats than those of 2010 or 2014. At worst, and slightly more likely, Donald Trump will beat Hillary Clinton in November. If trends continue, Republicans will take more governors' houses, more state legislatures, and more state governments. By 2020, the Republican Party will have enough seats in state government and enough voter suppression laws to effectively end the viability of the Democratic Party in the majority of states, and consequently on the national level. When the districts get redrawn after the 2020 census, the Democratic Party will cease to exist. In other words, if we don't change course, if we don't have radical change, if we don't have a political revolution, it's game over. The only way to save the party from obliteration is to reinvigorate the electorate, bring in new voters, fight for their right to vote, and increase voter turnout, not just in general elections, but also in midterms. Democrats might not want a political revolution, but they need one if they're going to survive. The media has spent much of this campaign season exclaiming that Donald Trump has little chance of getting anywhere in the primary and that Donald Trump was destroying the Republican Party. But if you were paying attention in the 2012 election, you saw the same disunity in the Republican primary then and the same coming together and falling in line you're seeing now. You were told by pundits and analysts that Donald Trump couldn't win despite the fact that at no point since his announcement was he losing in the polls. In contemporary Republican primaries, the most moderate candidate always wins. The candidate who attacked George Bush for the Iraq War, who defended Planned Parenthood on a debate stage with Ted Cruz, who said he wouldn't cut Social Security, and was called out for sounding like Obama when talking about winding down wars so we can spend money on infrastructure, and sounding like Bernie Sanders when talking about healthcare. He was the most moderate candidate in the race, and he won. That whole media narrative around Donald Trump was a sham. Those same pundits who told you that Trump couldn't win a debate, couldn't win a primary, couldn't win the Republican nomination, are now telling you that he can't win the presidency. The reality is, Donald Trump is the strongest Republican candidate I've seen in my lifetime, even stronger than George Bush, who was president for 8 years. The Real Clear Politics average of polls already shows him slightly above Hillary Clinton, and all of those polls were done before the State Department's Inspector General report regarding Hillary Clinton's emails, which proved that she has been lying for over a year about having permission to use a private server in her private email. She did not seek permission, would not have gotten permission if she had sought it. The rules changed when she took office, unlike what she's still saying, so what previous secretaries of state did or did not do is irrelevant. And that Hillary Clinton and many of her staffers refused to be interviewed, like 4 other former secretaries of state, for the State Department Inspector General investigation. Hillary also refused to report hacking attempts on the private server to the appropriate security officials. Hillary has argued that she simply wanted to keep her private emails private and have the convenience of using one email. I can sympathize, but someone who voted for the Patriot Act and continues to support and defend the American government's mass surveillance of its own citizens and others across the world doesn't get to make that hypocritical argument. She can't make the argument when she's in favor of the federal government reading all of our emails. By the way, if Donald Trump becomes president, he will have access to everyone in the world's emails because Hillary Clinton fought and voted for it. In any case, Donald Trump was beating Hillary Clinton in the polls before the State Department's Obama-appointed Inspector General officially weighed in on Hillary Clinton's emails. And there's still an ongoing FBI investigation. Hillary's attacks on Donald Trump aren't going to work. She's already not running on her own record, and is simply arguing that Donald Trump is bad for America. Her playbook is to imply her opponent is racist, like when she claimed Obama was racist against white people, or Sanders was racist against black and Latino people, and even got my own congressman to imply that he was lying about his civil rights record. But everyone knows Donald Trump is a bigot, and he's still tied with Hillary Clinton in the polls. Hillary often implies that her opponent is sexist, calling her opponent's supporters Obama boys and Bernie bros. But everyone knows Donald Trump is a misogynist, and he's still beating her in most of the recent polls. She attacked Obama and Sanders for having pie-in-the-sky ideas, but no one thinks Mexico is going to pay for a border wall, and Donald Trump is still on track to win the presidency. But what's interesting about the polls isn't that Hillary is losing, but that Bernie Sanders isn't. He really isn't. The Real Clear Politics average has him up 11 points over Donald Trump. Supporters of Hillary Clinton have argued that those numbers will drop once Republicans are attacking him in the general, possibly uncovering some unbeknownst scandal that could wreck his chances in a general election. You know, something akin to Hillary Clinton's email scandal and FBI investigation. But regardless of which Democrat wins the primary, their polling numbers will take a hit when Republicans are attacking them nonstop. Do Democrats want to take a hit on an 11-point lead, or to someone already losing to Trump? The 11-point difference between Sanders and Clinton's performance against Trump is significant. It's been borne out in every national poll that's come out this year, and in most state polls. An Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll has Bernie winning my home state of Georgia and Hillary losing it to Trump. But that 11-point difference in national polls, which is the difference between winning and losing in November, especially for down-ticket Democrats in competitive races, represents 14 million votes in a general election that go from Bernie in a matchup against Trump to Trump in a matchup against Hillary. That's 14 million votes Democrats automatically lose when they nominate Hillary Clinton. There are many Democrats who are completely baffled. There are some Sanders supporters who would go over to Trump after the primaries and explain this away as a temper tantrum or a lack of commitment to democratic values and issues. But this interpretation is mistaken. Let's listen to these two men talk about money in politics.
I will tell you that our system is broken. I give to many people. Before 2 months ago, I was a businessman. I give to everybody. When they call, I give. And you know what? When I need something from them, 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me. So and that's a broken system.
Campaign finance system. And let me underline the word. Don't misquote me on this. It is a corrupt system.
And I will tell you this nonsense with PACs where they have millions of dollars raised, $100 million raised, and they don't coordinate with the other people. I mean, Bush puts his best friend in there. They don't talk. You're not allowed to talk. Do you really believe that that doesn't happen? Okay? They're not allowed to talk. Okay? They play golf on Saturday, but they don't talk about the $100 million or where they're going to invest. Come on. We're not babies. It's a shame. It's a disgrace.
But if I'm a normal politician who needs to raise $20, $50 million, where am I going to go? I'm going to sit down with the wealthy. I'm going to go to the country club. I'm going to do my fundraisers at fancy resorts. And I get to know those people. But that's the whole point of this corrupt campaign finance system. If you're going to contribute $1 million to my super PAC, well, maybe you're a hell of a nice guy and you like to participate. Or maybe you want something. I think you want something. And you and a guy are going to become really good buddies so I can do your bidding. In other words, the millionaire class and the billionaire class increasingly own the political process and they own the politicians who go to them for money.
I'm not doing what's right for a man that gave me $1 million to run for office and I owe him. And when Bush gets $100 million plus and when Hillary gets $50 million plus, every one of those people that put up money will control Bush. Control. I don't mean like a little bit. Bush is controlled by those people. Walker is controlled by those people. Hillary Clinton is controlled by those people.
And I worry very much, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, that we are moving very, very quickly from a democratic society, one person, one vote, to an oligarchic form of society where billionaires will be determining who the elected officials of this country are. I'm going to do everything I can to stop that.
One of them. I contribute to everybody. And they're always there for me. But that's not good for the country. That's not good as a system.
The logical consequence is that the only people who can run for office in America who don't have to curry favors are billionaires themselves.
How about trade deals?
Over the last 30, 40 years, we have had trade policies in this country written by corporate America. And what they have been designed to do is to allow companies to shut down plants in Vermont, in Wisconsin, and all over this country because they don't want to pay workers here $15, $20, $25 an hour. They don't want to pay them a living wage. They don't want to protect environmental rules. They don't want to deal with unions. They'd rather move to Mexico or China, pay people pennies an hour.
We have one thing very strongly in common. We know that the United States is being taken advantage horribly on trade deals. The difference between Bernie and myself is that I know how to make those trade deals fantastic.
Hillary has come out against trade deals like NAFTA and the new Trans-Pacific Partnership, but it wouldn't be the first time she lied about not supporting a trade deal during the campaign and supported it adamantly in office. The obvious examples are the Colombian and Panama Free Trade Agreements. Let's listen to what they say about regime change in the Middle East.
And I say this with due respect, that I worry too much that Secretary Clinton is too much into regime change and a little bit too aggressive without knowing what the unintended consequences might be. Yes, we could get rid of Saddam Hussein, but that destabilized the entire region. Yes, we could get rid of Gaddafi, a terrible dictator, but that created a vacuum for ISIS. Yes, we could get rid of Assad tomorrow, but that would create another political vacuum that would benefit ISIS. So I think, yeah, regime change is easy. Getting rid of dictators is easy. But before you do that, you got to think about what happens the day after. And in my view, what we need to do is put together broad coalitions to understand that we're not going to have a political vacuum filled by terrorists, that in fact we are going to move steadily and maybe slowly toward democratic societies. In terms of Assad, a terrible dictator. But I think in Syria, the primary focus now must be on destroying ISIS and working over the years to get rid of Assad. That's the secondary issue.
I spoke to a general 2 weeks ago. He said, he was very up on exactly what we're talking about. He said, you know, Mr. Trump, we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment to these people. We have no idea who they are. So I don't like Assad. Who's going to like Assad? But we have no idea who these people and what they're going to be and what they're going to represent. They may be far worse than Assad. Look at Libya. Look at Iraq. Look at the mess we have after spending $2 trillion, thousands of lives, wounded warriors all over the place who I love. Okay, all over. We have nothing.
How about Israel?
Of course, Israel has a right to defend itself. But long term, there will never be peace in that region unless the United States plays a role, an even-handed role, trying to bring people together and recognizing the serious problems that exist among the Palestinian people. That is what I believe the world wants us to do, and that's the kind of leadership that we have got to exercise.
Well, I think a lot is going to do with Israel, and look, it's going to have to do with both sides, but a lot will have to do with Israel and whether or not Israel wants to make the deal, whether or not Israel's willing to sacrifice certain things. They may not be, and I understand that, and I'm okay with that, but then you're just not going to have a deal.
Hillary praises Netanyahu as a close friend and an excellent leader. Netanyahu, who openly endorsed Mitt Romney in 2012, and spoke to Congress in order to undermine President Obama's Iranian nuclear deal. There are many issues in which Sanders and Trump seem to agree, and if any of those issues are core issues for a Sanders supporter, then it makes perfect sense for that person to support Trump in the general. That's the case for nearly 14 million voters according to the polls, and that should be very concerning to Democrats. And while we're on the subject, I have to go back to money in politics for a second.
We have to reform our government and revitalize our democracy so it works for everybody. We have to stop the endless flow of secret, unaccountable money that is distorting our elections, corrupting our political process, drowning out the voices of people.
If you're someone that doesn't know a lot about the issue of campaign finance, that may have sounded good to you. But that statement scares me. Hillary often remarks that the Citizens United decision must be overturned so that we can get secret, unaccountable money out of American politics. She's chosen her words carefully, because that's not really the big issue with campaign finance. Transparency is obviously critical. No one disagrees. In fact, Anthony Kennedy, a conservative justice on the United States Supreme Court, once wrote that prompt disclosure of expenditures can provide shareholders and citizens with information needed to hold corporations and elected officials accountable for their positions and supporters. Shareholders can determine whether their corporation's political speech advances the corporation's interest in making profits, and citizens can see whether elected officials are in the pocket of so-called money interests. The First Amendment protects political speech, and disclosure permits citizens and shareholders to react to the speech of the corporate entities in a proper way. This transparency enables the electorate to make informed decisions and give proper weight to different speakers and messages. Where did Kennedy write this? In his landmark Supreme Court decision, commonly referred to as Citizens United. Right now, super PACs can receive unlimited funds from wealthy donors and interest groups, but are required to list their donors. But their donors sometimes have names like Americans for America. 501c4s and 501c6s are organizations that don't have to reveal their donors and can contribute large sums to super PACs. Other organizations are required to reveal their donors with their taxes. But that means those organizations don't have to reveal their donors until April, 6 months after the November elections. the laws regulating all these organizations could be changed to create more transparency. But our campaign finance system is intentionally opaque, and the politicians and judges that benefit from all that secret money are the only ones who can change it. One such politician is Hillary Clinton, who alongside her husband has received over $3 billion in contributions over their lifetime in politics, and who is currently stealing money from down-ticket Democrats. 99% of the money Hillary Clinton raised for down-ticket Democrats, the Hillary Victory Fund, a fund where George Clooney claimed most of the money was going to down-ticket Democrats, 99% of the money is going to the Clinton campaign and multiple schemes to get around campaign finance laws. Also troubling is Hillary Clinton's defense of her Wall Street speeches and donations. By the way, Senator Gillibrand, Hillary doesn't seem to have any intention of releasing those transcripts like you claimed. Anyway, Secretary Clinton often challenges Senator Sanders to name one time where financial contributions changed her vote. Other than the bankruptcy bill that she and Elizabeth Warren opposed when she was First Lady, and she suddenly supported after Wall Street donated significantly to her Senate campaign, or the fact that the First Lady, famous for fighting universal health care, is now campaigning against the very idea of universal health care after receiving millions in campaign contributions from health insurance and pharmaceutical industries, this argument is troubling because, as Justice Stevens wrote in his 90-page dissent in the Citizens United case, proving that a specific vote was exchanged for a specific expenditure has always been next to impossible. Elected officials have diverse motivations, and no one will acknowledge that he sold a vote. Yet even if ingratiation and access are not corruption themselves, they are necessary prerequisites to it. They can create both the opportunity for and the appearance of quid pro quo arrangements. Justice Stevens also said that corruption operates along a spectrum, and the majority's apparent belief that quid pro quo arrangements can be neatly demarcated from other improper influences does not accord with the theory or reality of politics. Justice Stevens writes that even the appearance of corruption must be fought, since it suggests a constitutionally intolerable probability of actual bias in the political system, and that big money in politics makes democratically elected bodies more attuned to the interests of corporations, lobbyists, and wealthy donors, exerts undue influence on the office holder's judgment, distorts public debate in ways that undermine rather than advance the interests of listeners, and promotes voter apathy and disengagement as they lose faith in the integrity of the process. Something that will surely happen to many Sanders voters, especially millennials, if Hillary Clinton beats Bernie Sanders' citizen-funded campaign with her super PAC money. After the mortgage crisis wiped out trillions of dollars of household wealth and cost taxpayers trillions more in bailouts, the Obama administration responded largely through billion-dollar settlements and fines, and not with criminal prosecutions or significant regulation or reform. After the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, hundreds of bankers were thrown in prison. Why were these reactions so different? Part of the answer is the gutting of regulatory power under President Bill Clinton and President George Bush. Another part of it is answered whenever Hillary Clinton defends her Wall Street speeches.
I would just say I debated then Senator Obama numerous times on stages like this, and he was the recipient of the largest number of Wall Street donations of anybody running on the Democratic side ever. Now, when it mattered, he stood up and took on Wall Street. He pushed through and he passed the Dodd-Frank regulations, the toughest regulations since the 1930s.
And Obama's audacity of hope. The future president muses over campaign finance, saying, "I can't assume the money chase didn't alter me in some ways. That, increasingly, I find myself spending time with people of means, law firm partners and investment bankers, hedge fund managers and venture capitalists." He continued, "Still, I know that as a consequence of my fundraising, I became more like the wealthy donors I met." This part of the problem is access. Politicians surround themselves with wealthy donors and lobbyists because they have to do so much fundraising. And after a while, the only perspective they hear or understand is the perspective of those wealthy donors. Things like free trade, corporate subsidies, gutting corporate taxes, deregulation, reducing Social Security and pensions become a given in Washington discourse because that's what the wealthy donors want. As Bernie Sanders states, these industries wouldn't be investing millions into politics if it wasn't gaining them substantial returns.
let's not insult the intelligence of the American people. People aren't dumb. Why in God's name does Wall Street make huge campaign contributions? I guess just for the fun of it. They want to throw money around. Why does the pharmaceutical industry make huge campaign contributions? Any connection, maybe, to the fact that our people pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Why does the fossil fuel industry spend huge amounts of money on campaign contributions? Any connection to the fact that not one Republican candidate for president thinks and agrees with the scientific community that climate change is real?
As far as Wall Street regulations go, Congressman Barney Frank, for whom the Dodd-Frank is named, had this to say about Wall Street contributions.
Do you think it would really be better for liberals, regulators, if all the money from the banks went to Republicans as opposed to just 80%? Because we could accomplish that. We could refuse to accept any. And I again have to tell you, I've accepted money from financial institutions. Some of them gave me once, didn't give me again. Obama, by the way, in 2008, no Democrat ever got as much as he did for the financial institutions. They gave him once, then they stopped giving.
This argument that Democrats can't be too tough on Wall Street, for fear that they will give all their donations to Republicans, ignores Sanders' call to remove all corporate money from elections and move to publicly funded and citizen-funded campaigns. It's also key to understanding just how the Democratic Party finds itself on the ropes, despite having the popular positions on almost every issue. In U.S. elections, the candidate who raises the most money almost always wins. The person who raises the most money is almost always the person who convinces the most millionaires, billionaires, special interests, and corporations to give them the most money. As Barney Frank noted earlier, both sides have to do it. This is bad for Democrats because the Republican Party is the party that represents the interests of millionaires, billionaires, and corporate America. They have a distinct advantage in this campaign finance system based on begging those groups for money, and have used that advantage to win elections in numbers and in states that simply were not imaginable before the 2010 Citizens United decision. Some say that Republicans have a money advantage, but Democrats have a demographic advantage. America is becoming a minority-majority country, and that makes Democratic victories inevitable over time. But that assertion is only accurate if two things are true. First, that minorities will continue to vote for Democrats by overwhelming margins. That's true. That is definitely true. No debate. Second is that those voters actually vote. And there's the rub. After the Supreme Court struck down part of the Voting Rights Act, Republican legislatures across the country started implementing ID requirements for voting. Again, not just in red states, but in blue states like Wisconsin. They claim that the laws are fighting voter fraud, but multiple Republicans throughout the country have fairly openly stated that the true goal of these ID laws are to make it harder for Democrats to vote. Senator Bernie Sanders understands that in order to save the Democratic Party, more people have to vote. Democrats must fight to make it easier for people to vote and give them something to vote for. He understands that winning elections in the numbers that Democrats need will require campaign finance reform, automatically registering people to vote at age 18, strengthening the Voting Rights Act to remove these ID laws that would not have been passed under the Civil Rights era legislation, and a 50-state strategy to win elections in parts of the country Democrats don't even try to be competitive in anymore. Democrats have all the popular positions, from not banning abortion to legalizing marijuana, raising the minimum wage, making sure that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of taxes, joining the rest of the industrialized world in adopting universal health care, tuition-free college, protecting the environment, and fighting climate change. Many of these policies passed in red states even in the shellacking that was the 2014 election midterm. Even when Democrats were losing elections, their policies were thriving. To win elections, Democrats simply need to be synonymous with those popular ideas. And that brings us to 2016, where the Democratic Party is set to nominate someone who doesn't want to legalize marijuana, is wary of raising the minimum wage to a living wage, and is actively running against universal health care, free college, and is spouting rhetoric that is antithetical to campaign finance reform, and repeats arguments from conservative justices in Citizens United. who supported the Panama Free Trade Agreement, which opened tax havens for millionaires and corporations to hide their money, who sold weapons and fracking across the world, continues to pursue policies of regime change in the Middle East that made Iraq, Libya, and ISIS what they are today, and is running a campaign fueled by Wall Street, the pharmaceutical industry, gun manufacturers, and fossil fuel lobbyists. There are those who say that the midterm elections were lost because young people didn't come out to vote. Do you honestly believe that Hillary Clinton will inspire millennials to come out to vote in 2018? It doesn't seem like that's even happening in 2016. The recent ABC Washington Post poll shows Hillary Clinton in a statistical tie with Donald Trump among young voters. Millennials have been saying burn your bus since before the first primary vote was cast. The lack of enthusiasm for the least popular Democratic candidate in the history of the United States is likely going to cost the Democratic Party this election. And for those thinking that millennials will come around, let me remind you that when Dr. Paul Song controversially called Hillary Clinton and other establishment Democrats corporate Democratic whores, his largely millennial crowd cheered raucously. For those calling for party unity and for Bernie Sanders supporters to rally around Hillary, have you ever voted for someone you considered a corporate whore? Do you think that you would? Do you think that millennials will? Do you think they will show up for her in midterm elections? Millennials don't have a history of falling in line. They have a history of not voting. So when they're threatening not to vote, that's something that should be taken seriously. Hillary's campaign has left the largest generation of voters uninspired, and her constant ridiculing of those millennials as kids that want free stuff and don't do their research, and for the vision of America that they have embraced, a tactic also used in 2008, is making them openly hostile to her candidacy. Hillary Clinton is standing in the way of an entire generation in their hopes to build a more perfect union. If she wins the Democratic nomination, it will disillusion an entire generation of progressives and turn them away from politics, just as the Reagan years had done to liberals the generation before. Hillary attacked Bernie for not being a true Democrat, and that tells Bernie supporters, people who have embraced his vision of America, which includes an entire generation that otherwise would be the future of the Democratic Party, she's telling them that they don't want a Democrat to be president. And this is a short-sighted and devastating argument because she's right. Sooner or later, millennials will realize that if they want politicians who will fight for living wages and affordable college, who will fight against corruption and limit corporate influence in our politics, who will fight against voter disenfranchisement, not just talk about it, who will bring the United States into the 21st century and guarantee healthcare as a right for all our people, these are our values, and they are not the value of Hillary Clinton or her Democratic Party. And instead of fighting for our values and rebuilding the middle class, young people are being asked to vote for someone who, after 15 years of the United States losing wars in the Middle East, wars that have undoubtedly made the world, the region, and our nation less safe, we should vote for someone who thinks that we should just be more aggressive, invade more countries, topple more dictators. Her militarism disturbs us because we're the ones who have to fight those wars. We're the ones who have to live in a less safe world. And those of us that get to return home get to join the long list of people who are screwed out of their veterans benefits because Democrats don't call out Republicans when they do that bullshit to our men and women in uniform. Vote for someone who doesn't have a plan to extend Social Security because she clearly intends to cut it, just as President Obama tried to do in his grand bargain with the Republicans. Older Americans are already struggling to get by on Social Security. And given that millennials don't have the job or income prospects that brought their grandparents to where they are now, or their parents to lose their house in the mortgage crisis, and that those millennials have student loan debt that will delay further and further their ability to effectively save up for retirement, they're going to need those Social Security benefits even more than those currently struggling on them. By the time most of you hear this, Hillary Clinton will have likely won the most pledged delegates. But as I speak, there is still time for the Democrats to nominate someone who will fight voter suppression and voter apathy, who will fight for living wages, tuition-free public college, and health care for all, who will fight to end the unlimited corporate and wealthy donor-driven elections that have driven the Republicans to their prominence and the Democrats to their electoral grave. There is still time to save the Democratic Party before the Republicans can redraw most state districts in 2020 and end the Democrats as a national party. Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont, can win the independent vote. Exit polls show us that Bernie lost the Democratic vote in Michigan by 18 points and won the state because independents flocked to him in the same numbers that millennials did. National polls have Clinton losing the independent vote to Donald Trump, but suggest Sanders crushes Trump with another 14 million votes that Hillary Clinton doesn't have access to. Millions of independents are choosing between Senator Sanders and Donald Trump, and the job of the Democrats should not be to make that an easy choice. We can't elect someone we know is going to lose the 2018 midterms. Someone we can't be certain will win 2016. Someone who steals money from down-ticket Democrats to get around campaign finance laws. Bernie Sanders has spent years in Washington, D.C., amending bills so they better help the middle class. When Hillary attacked Bernie for not supporting small businesses through the Export-Import Bank, Bernie reminded her just who wrote small business lending into that bill so that it wasn't completely corporate giveaways.
I just want to explain to viewers what the Export-Import Bank is, in case everybody is not quite as wonkish as all of us on the stage here. The Export-Import Bank, it's a federal agency. It gives loans to companies that export American products. Senator Sanders, you do oppose it. The vast majority of the bank's customers are small businesses, 176 right here in Michigan. What do you say to small business owners who rely on the banks to make their companies profitable?
I'll tell you what I say. Do you know what the other name of the Export-Import Bank is, what it's called in Washington? It's called the Bank of Boeing, because Boeing itself gets 40% of the money discharged by the Export-Import Bank. 75% of the funds going for the federal government, the Export-Import Bank, goes to large, profitable corporations. Many of these corporations have shut down in America and have gone abroad to exploit poor people. You know what? I don't think it's a great idea for the American taxpayer to have to subsidize through corporate welfare profitable corporations who downsize in the United States of America. 75% of that money goes to large, profitable corporations.
Senator Sanders, though, you were the only member of the Democratic caucus to vote against it. You're agreeing with Senator Ted Cruz on this. Why is he right and the Democrats wrong?
Well, let me tell you, I don't want to break the bad news. Democrats are not always right. Democrats have often supported corporate welfare. Democrats have supported disastrous trade agreements. But on this issue, I do not believe in corporate welfare. And in fact, Secretary Clinton may know or not know that as a member of the Financial Services Committee, I work very hard and successfully to make sure that at least 20% of the money went to small businesses, which is where it should go, not to profitable corporations downsizing our country.
Bernie Sanders earned the reputation as the Amendment King because he added to every bill he could language fighting for the middle class. And now it's time to fight for him. Now it's time to save the party.
The problems we faced did not come down from the heavens. They are made by bad human decisions. And good human decisions can change them.